and thank you all for coming. It's been a pretty surreal month since the book came out, and it's really great to see some familiar faces, some former students in the crowd, and some friendly faces. Seemingly friendly faces. So instead of giving a talk, I'm guessing that people have a lot of questions. So I thought that I would start by saying something very briefly about how I came to write the book. And then, because I'm guessing, I'm fearing that many of you may only have read the Wall Street Journal excerpt. And again, for the 1,000,000th time, no, I did not write or even know of the headline, and I do not believe that Chinese parenting is superior. I think that there are many ways of being a good parent, but because I'm worried that many of you or most of you may only have read the excerpt, which is from the very opening of my book, I thought I would read a few pages from towards the middle of the book, and then some pages from near the end of the book, just to give you more of a sense for what the book is really about. And then we'll just take questions. So this book was actually far from being triumphalist. It was actually born in a moment of genuine crisis when my younger daughter Lulu rebelled at the age of 13. By way of background, myself and my 3 younger sisters, we were raised by extremely strict but extremely loving Chinese immigrant parents. They actually emigrated to Boston in 1960 to come as graduate students, and you know, the whole American dream story. They were so poor their first 2 winters in Boston, and it's really cold tonight. They couldn't afford heat their first 2 winters, so they wore blankets around to keep warm. As parents, my mom and dad were really, really strict, very, very tough with my 3 sisters and me, but it worked. To this day, I adore my parents. I feel I owe them everything, and I always think this is the biggest thing. We voluntarily love to vacation with them every chance we get, so I can't say a lot. But because I guess it worked with me, that's why, even though my husband is not Chinese, he's a Jewish American, we decided to raise our 2 daughters the same way, or try to raise my 2 daughters, Sophia and Lulu, the same way that my parents raised me. And with my oldest daughter, Sophia, things went, you know, pretty smoothly. She likes to point out that she let them go smoothly. But then my second daughter, Lulu, came along, and she's a real fireball. She and I have very similar personalities, hot tempers. I feel like she kind of came out kicking and screaming and saying no. But with Lulu, I basically got my comeuppance. We locked horns from day 1, and at 13 she rebelled. So the book is basically a story of our family's journey, you know, in 2 cultures, a foot in each culture, and my own transformation as a mother. It is not a parenting book. It's a memoir. It's supposed to be funny. It's like a self-parody, and much of it is making fun of myself. So, and the actual writing of the book, I literally wrote it in a moment of crisis. As I say, after my younger daughter Lulu rebelled, there was we had one terrible, well, we were having awful fights, and you know, when it rains it pours. Around the same time, my youngest sister, who was here actually in Boston, got leukemia and had to have a bone marrow transplant, and everything was going wrong, and I sort of felt like the family was falling apart, and I was thinking, have I done everything wrong? And then after one awful blow-up, and I'm going to read that scene, the next morning, one very public awful fight that I had with Lulu, I got up the next morning, and even though I usually have writer's block, those 2 other books took me 8 and 5 years to write. I would just write like 1 paragraph a day. I considered good. But in this case, I wrote the words just poured out. I wrote the first 2/3 of the book in just 2 months. The last third, forever. I just couldn't get the ending right. It's still a work in progress. But I showed every page to my daughters and my husband, and it was basically like family therapy. So it was, I think it was a good process. So let me now just read a few pages from the book. Really, I'm keeping this very short to leave time for more questions. I think just total of 10 pages, double-spaced. So, the opening of the book, I mean, the book has a real arc. So at the opening of the book, it's really me, looking back 18 years ago to kind of the cocky, overconfident parent I was. And it's a little bit of a caricature, but that's the tone, the voice that you got in the Wall Street Journal excerpt. Sort of stubbornly obtuse. And it's funny the way the book has been received, because if you were to ask me, you can ask my daughters, what kind of books I had in mind when I wrote this. My models, my idols were, something more like David Sedaris's books, Dave Eggers, Heartbreaking Work of Staggering Genius, Nabokov's Pale Fire. I mean, I love these books where the narrator is a clearly flawed character, and then there are other protagonists. So the first thing I'm going to read from you is near the beginning of the book. This is a music scene. It's only just half a page, very short. And this is a scene with my daughter, Lulu, who was about 7 at the time. She was just starting to play the violin. And we had a wonderful violin teacher named Mr. Shugart, who just saw her musicality and really brought out all the best in her. We were doing the Suzuki method. So, one thing that the piano and violin have in common with each other, but also with many sports, is that you can't play extraordinarily well unless you're relaxed. Just as you can't have a killer tennis serve or throw a baseball really far unless you keep your arm loose, you can't produce a mellifluous tone on the violin if you squeeze the bow too tightly or mash down on the strings. Mashing is what makes the horrible scratchy sound. And Mr. Shugart was a genius with Lulu. Imagine that you're a rag doll, Mr. Shugart would tell Lulu. Floppy and relaxed, and not a care in the world. You're so relaxed your arm feels heavy from its own weight. Let gravity do all the work. Good, Lulu, good. Relax, I screamed at home. Mr. Shugart said, rag dolls. I always tried my best to reinforce Mr. Shugart's points, but things were tough with Lulu because my very presence made her edgy and irritable. Once, in the middle of a practice session, Lulu burst out. Stop it, Mommy, just stop it. Lulu, I replied, I didn't say anything. I didn't say one word. Your brain is annoying me, Lulu said. I know what you're thinking. I'm not thinking anything, I said indignantly. Actually, I'd been thinking that Lulu's right elbow was too high, that her dynamics were all wrong, and that she needed to shape her phrases better. Just turn off your brain, Lulu ordered. I'm not going to play anymore unless you turn off your brain. Lulu was always trying to provoke me. Getting into an argument was a way of not practicing. That time, I didn't bite. Okay, I said calmly. How do you want me to do that? Giving Lulu control over the situation sometimes diffused her temper. Lulu thought about it. Hold your nose for 5 seconds. A lucky break. I complied, and the practicing resumed. That was one of our good days. Now I'm going to read from the middle of the book. This is, I don't know, maybe Sophia, my oldest daughter, must be around maybe 15. My youngest daughter, Lulu, probably around 12. Our clashes are getting a little bit more serious. I'm starting to have more internal doubts, but I am still stubbornly holding my ground. So again, just a very short passage, not even a page. Oh, and this passage, I have to say, is provocative. Wrong word. Here's a question I often get. But Amy, let me ask you this. Who are you doing all this pushing for? Your daughters? And then here, always, the cocked head, the knowing tone, or yourself? I find this a very Western question to ask, because in Chinese thinking, the child is the extension of the self. But that doesn't mean it's not an important question. My answer, I'm pretty sure, is that everything I do is unequivocally 100% for my daughters. My main evidence is that so much of what I do with Sophia and Lulu is miserable, exhausting, and not remotely fun for me. It is not easy to make your kids work when they don't want to. To put in grueling hours when your own youth is slipping away. To convince your kids they can do something when they, and maybe even you, are fearful that they can't. Do you know how many years you've taken off my life? I'm constantly asking my girls. You're both lucky that I have enormous longevity, as indicated by my thick good luck earlobes. That's a Chinese thing. To be honest, I sometimes wonder if the question, who are you really doing this for, should be asked of Western parents too. Sometimes I wake up in the morning dreading what I have to do and thinking how easy it would be to say, sure Lulu, we can skip a day of violin practice. Unlike my Western friends, I can never say, as much as it kills me, I just have to let my kids make their choices and follow their hearts. It's the hardest thing in the world, but I'm doing my best to hold back. Then they get to have a glass of wine and go to a yoga class, whereas I have to stay home and scream and have my kids hate me. And finally,